Good morning. Oh, audience participation already. I love it. So welcome to Schroders. My name is Penny Hope. I am the Chief of Staff for Global Technology, and I'm absolutely delighted that we're having you all here today to join us for this event, and that we are partnering once again with Harrington Starr, we sponsored Nadia's book launch earlier this year. If it's not a book you've read, I would highly recommend FinTech Women Walk the Talk. More on that later. So today's agenda, we're very honoured to have Sir Ron Kalifa here joining us for some key opening remarks. We're then going to move to a panel. And after the panel, that's the formal bit over and done with, and then you can all relax and have a good time. So there'll be lunch and then a few breakout activities, but I'll cover that at the end of the panel. So now, with no further ado, I am delighted to be introducing Sir Ron Kalifa, author of the Kalifa Review of the UK FinTech 2021. Sir Ron.
Morning, everyone. Right, great. Guys, look, I'm really delighted to be here. I'm so sorry not to be dressed in FinTech gear. But one of the roles I've got is at the Bank of England. I'm on the board there. And we had the wreath laying ceremony this morning, and I didn't think jeans and a kind of, baggy jumper would really work. So if you don't mind, that's why I'm dressed in this. But let me talk a little bit about FinTech. And firstly, thank you for organizing this from Harrington Starr. This is such an incredible thing, and it's fantastic to see the level of interest in FinTech. And FinTech is something that, is still a bit of a odd word, an expression. And I have to say, when I was writing the report, I was trying to find a way not to reference FinTech. And the reason for that is, I think many people still think about it as a couple of people down at Shoreditch working with an iPad, thinking that they're going to make $1 million. That's this week, and then $1 billion the following week. But it really is, I think, a significant sector. And when people ask me, quite often, what is FinTech and why does it matter? My answer typically is that I think FinTech is the future of financial services. It shouldn't be considered niche, nor should it be considered a subsector. It's permanent, and it's changing the shape of finance. Now, all of you are converts, but the world still needs to understand that in a better way. So I think you should all be evangelists for this as you go forward in your careers. It's also not about startups. We do not have a problem in the UK in terms of startups. We have a number of organizations, too many maybe, that are starting up in the FinTech space. It's actually when we get to the scale up, which is typically what you would call Series B plus, when fundraising is coming, that's where the challenges are. There's not enough of those that go on to become significant organizations as they have in the States. And we need to make sure that the UK is at the forefront of that. But FinTech is also about the way that we regulate new technology and, frankly, set new standards. But importantly, really importantly, I think it's about delivering better, cheaper, and much more inclusive financial services for customers, especially consumers and SMEs. The mission is the cornerstone for the continuing success that we've seen here in terms of FinTech. And let me just help you with some data and statistics. I'm going to give this to you because it might be useful when you're going through your career and you're going through an interview or something, and people say, well, why do you want to join FinTech? There's some data points which will make you look even smarter than you are, that you might want to just use, which is basically that the UK represents 10% of the global market share. So we are a leader in this sector, and it contributes about £11 billion to the economy. And we've established ourselves as the dominant player globally. The reason for that is there are many things for that. One is that capital and investment in FinTech is actually very strong. Last year, nearly $12 billion was invested in UK FinTech. That's second only to the States, but the States is a larger market. But if you actually index it, it's about the same. We're about on a par with the States. But more importantly, it's more, that $12 billion is more than the next 6 European countries combined. So the level of investment that's coming into the UK is significant. We've also ranked number 2 in the world and number one in Europe, as I said, and we're on track, I think, now to be even better at that in terms of 2022, as the sector has continued to grow with further investment reaching about 9 billion already this year. So our combination of financial talent and technical talent, I think, is very, very significant, and that's another reason for our strength in the UK. And we've set the benchmark for policy-led innovation. Something like 50 countries now have replicated the FCA's regulatory sandbox. And if you think about COVID, it's done nothing apart from accelerate the adoption of digital activity. One statistic that I often cite is that 6 million people, that's about 12% of the adult population, downloaded a banking app for the very first time in that very first month of lockdown. And you can imagine, having access to that. Now, some will still go back to branches, but the reality is that people are going to go and carry on using apps for this. And according to other data that I've seen, today's digital banks hold 11% of primary checking accounts, and 30% cite a fintech as their primary financial institution. And about 8 out of 10 consumers now use fintech products. So this is not a niche. This is something that's now embedded throughout society. And it's just at the moment, people still have a bit of a misnomer as to what is this thing about. So whilst we're starting from a strong base, I don't think we can rest on our laurels. Now is the time, frankly, to build on our successes in the UK and shift our approach to reflect the needs of a maturing, growing, and competitive industry. Global competition, COVID, Russia's war in Ukraine are all creating challenges. There's no question of that. But if we continue to act with the important buy-in from government and regulators, which I think is increasingly happening, we can continue to take a lead and convert these threats into real opportunities. And that was really at the heart of some work I did last year in terms of the review of fintech, which was basically a strategy for the UK in terms of what do we need to do and how do we get better. And it's an evolving landscape, for professionals looking to fintech for a career. I'd encourage all of you to have an open mind, and the sector is going to continue to evolve. So what it is today won't necessarily be the answer in terms of how it moves forward. And I think you'll start to see new opportunities arising as we go forward. There's, of course, quite a lot of glamour associated with working in a sort of two-person band in a garage in Old Street. But it's important to remember that there's a wide range of other routes to take that are at the heart of the fintech ecosystem. This could be a scale-up in fintech, an incumbent financial services organization which is embracing the latest wave of technology, or other professional services, firms who value digital skills. Let me just talk in practical terms about some things that I see in terms of advice. And I'm always reluctant to give advice because you've all got your own journeys and your own perspectives. But as you think about, either moving jobs, going for promotion, whatever it is, I would encourage you all to quantify your CV. Make sure your CV has got numbers on it. Now, you might think, well, what the hell is that about? But, talk about data to show scale. Talk about responsibility that you've had. Talk about profit that you've contributed to, or value that you've created. It's really important because if you think about firms, they're looking for people who can help them grow. The other thing is that CVs typically don't get read. Yeah, I get loads of them showing up on my desk and I skim them. I do skim them, so I'm sorry, but that's the reality of life. So you've got to be really clear and set out to make it easy to read. Don't have lots of paragraphs or lots of just script in there. What I'd encourage is bullet points, but every bullet point should start with a verb. Managed, responsible for, led, whatever it's going to be. And don't get hung up also, if you're in an organization at the moment, on promotion. We all want promotion. I've been there. I can always remember I was working in Natwest at the time, and I was sitting in a role for about 3 years, and I just wasn't getting promoted, and everyone else was getting promoted. And what I look back on it now, and I was pretty unhappy is the word about it. But the reality was that it was just frustrating. But promotion will come, but think about making sure that you build on your career in terms of experiences that you do. Career experiences are actually going to be much more useful to build on your CV, because your opportunity isn't about just staying in one organization. Also, when you see the job role, do study it. Use terminology that is in the job role. It's shocking to see when you get a job description defined and someone talks about something and you think, well, hang on, how on earth is this married up? So make sure that you're using the language. It's there for a purpose. It's guiding you in terms of what you need to do. And connect your experiences with that role. And importantly, when you go for an interview, practice your answers and then practice again. Practice in a mirror, practice with friends, whatever it's going to be. People are going to basically call you out, practice with them. And think about the points you want to emphasize. You will always get the chance to emphasize the points you want if you can weave them in. So just find a way to weave them in. The opening question, I always think, is usually a bit of a free hit. It's usually, tell me about you, why does this role appeal, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what the question is. Tell them what you want them to know, because your impact in that first few minutes will determine whether you get the job. I can guarantee it. There have been numerous times when I've been sitting in front of people, interviewed them, and I thought, oh God, this person's boring. And after 15 minutes, I find an excuse to close the meeting because I've made my mind up. So, make sure that you get your points across in the beginning. And importantly, think about bookends. Beginning's important and the end's important as well. Be ready to ask questions. Typically, the questions you ask at the end will help the interviewer think about how you have thought about the job, about the role. You can ask the question, what does the interviewer expect of you? What's the goal of the company? How they're going to judge success? What's expected in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Find a way to build a rapport with the interviewer. Why did you join this business? What are some of the challenges in this department or in this role that you would expect I would have? What's the day-to-day responsibility in the role? I mean, these sound very obvious questions, but you'd be shocked at the fact that people don't use the opportunity to ask those questions. And one opportunity you've got at the end is to basically ask the interviewer, do they have any areas of concern about my ability for the role? It's an opportunity for you to listen and to correct any points that are being raised. Use that opportunity. You don't get that opportunity easily. So, ask the question and respond to it so that you actually can, prove that you're better than the next person who's going to walk in through the door. Also, references are really important. I personally rely, probably I would say 60% on references and 40% on interview. And for the senior roles, interviews typically will take 2 hours. And that's the first interview. So references are going to be really important. You've got to know what the references are going to say, because that shows self-awareness. And it's really important that you show that you understand yourself, because the organization is taking a punt on you. I mean, that's what it's doing. So make sure that you've got self-awareness in terms of that. And the references will probably be available beforehand. So someone will have said, well, actually, he's pretty good at this, or she's pretty good at that, but actually struggles with that. Bring that into your answers, because what that will do is it will show that you've already addressed it in your mind and you're aware of it, as opposed to someone thinking, well, this person's got no clue about themselves. And then, think about, as you think about your career steps as you go forward, access to qualified and suitable talent, I think, remains one of the biggest challenges for the UK and globally in terms of fintech and our tech sectors generally. Tech is second in importance in the UK labour market, only to healthcare. There are 3 million jobs in our digital economy today. And currently the demand for tech roles and digital skills outweighs the supply. So you are pushing on an open door by making sure that you're fit for purpose as you walk through the door for opportunities. The challenges, I think, that span both domestic skills shortages that we're all reading about, and the need to access foreign talent seamlessly. Those are some of the challenges that are happening at the moment. And I think education is the key to unlocking potential talent. And education isn't about formal education, it's about learning, it's about the experiences. So when you are in a role at the moment, look around, learn about what's going on. And I always used to, I mean, it doesn't exist anymore, but I used to always encourage people when they joined my organization to get them to follow the paperclip, as I used to call it. So understand when, let's call it, an application for a new customer comes in, what happens to that journey? What's the operational process associated with it? So if you're in a role at the moment, you're thinking about progressing within, do you understand how the organization works? Those sorts of skills and experiences will actually help you articulate things that, frankly, most people won't think about. So show the differentiator that you can create. So, as I think about the gathering here, I mean, all of you have been successful in what you're doing. You're obviously looking for the next opportunity, and I'm sure you'll be successful in that. And you're well positioned. But if I think about my journey, I ran a business called WorldPay. People heard of the WorldPay? Just show of hands, just out of interest. Okay, good. Keep spending, please. Yeah. And WorldPay was a business which was bought many years ago by Natwest. And it was, I was living in Kent at the time, and this business was in Cambridge. It was 75 people when the bank said, look, you seem to understand something about the internet. Would you fancy going and looking after it? So I went up there. It was 75 people. It was making a loss of about £7 million. That was in 2002. And it was a bit of a slog. I have to tell you, it was a slog, because the reality was it was a business which was pointed in a particular direction when I first went there. And we had to repurpose what it was trying to do. At the time, it was focused on consumers, and we had to change it because there weren't many people buying on the internet. But we had to change it to make it much more relevant for merchants or retailers. And that's how the business grew over a period of time. I was always of the view that scale mattered. And if I think about the ingredients for success in any fintech business, it's typically scale. The second is scale is about volume. You've got to have as much volume as you can because it helps productivity, drives lower unit cost. The second is access to distribution. Where are you going to get your customers from? You've got to be really focused on that. Thirdly, most businesses now that you're thinking about will be platform businesses, will be technology businesses. So the technology capability and the robustness of that is going to be vital. And the last one, particularly in the financial services space, is regulation. Regulation is your friend. Don't think of it as a negative thing. Think about it in terms of you've got some guardrails. How do you use those guardrails to drive the business and grow faster? So that 75-person business grew rapidly. We moved it into private equity because NatWest and then RBS didn't have the capital to fund it. It was sold for about £2 billion in 2010. The PE guys invested another £1.5 billion. And 5 years later, we listed in London for £6 billion. PE guys were happy, customers were happy, staff were happy, and did pretty well. 18 months later, that business was bought by someone else, a US entity, and then another business bought the combined entity for $43 billion. So it's been a journey which has been, amazing, frankly, and shocking in equal measure. But the things that I think I learned particularly was that I found out that I wasn't very good at many things, but what I was okay at was to recruit people around me who could compensate for the things I wasn't good at. And it's a bit of a cliche. Every CEO, every business person says that. Every manager says that. But very rarely do people do it because they lack confidence in getting someone in who potentially is going to be better than them. But don't be afraid to work with colleagues. I think the world we're in now is much more about collaboration than it has been. And I think it's important that you use your career path to work with people who can add something to your own capabilities. So look, Harrington Starr is partnering with Schroders today to, I think, bring you an afternoon of panels, workshops and activities to help you, frankly, get ready for the next stage of your career and to give you the best chance of success. And I'm sure that you'll enjoy what is to come. I want to say congratulations to all of you for what you've achieved. But you've got everything going for you in terms of the sector that you're interested in. I think fintech is the future of financial services, and it's an area that you can make a mark. You can shape a business. You can shape people's lives by doing it. I never thought that would be the case. I just sort of went in from one job to another. But actually, if I look back on it, you'd be surprised how much you can influence and shape. And you'll achieve a lot, but it will require resilience, and it will require collaboration. And I'd encourage all of you to do that. So I wish you lots of success in your careers as you go forward. And thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it. Thank you. Anyway.
Very kind of you to help us with that speech. Right, we're moving on to the next section, which is the panel. So if I can invite the panelists to join me on stage, that would be great. Thank you. And whilst they're doing that, please could I remind you all, if you would like to ask the panel a question, you can see on the screens around the room, there is a link to slido.com. So if you go to slido.com, you can download the Slido app. And there you'll be able to submit questions, and we will get through as many of the questions as we can. I'm not going to introduce the panel because I'm going to get them to introduce themselves. Right, so with no further ado, welcome panel, and thank you for joining us. So I'm going to literally go down the line. Intros, please. David.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. So my name is David Fisayo, and I'm the co-founder of Wealth 8. And Wealth 8, so we're empowering people of African heritage wherever they are to build wealth, and we achieve this through an app that offers financial education and saving and investing in diversified portfolios, managed by like BlackRock, JP Morgan, big investment managers. So it's all about enabling people to kind of invest in the future. My background, I was a digital consultant at KPMG, working within financial kind of services, and I moved into product development. So I'd like to say I'm a non-techie, but I'm working with those engineers to actually build solutions. So looking forward to being on the panel today and speaking with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Julie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Ashmore. I'm CEO of Natwest Rapid Cash, which is a digital business within the Natwest Group. I've been involved in banking and financial services for way too long. It makes me feel very old. But I'm sensible amongst friends, so I will disclose 36 years. In both banking, large banks such as Natwest, but also independent financial services businesses. And probably most important, and why I'm sat here dressed as a fintech person, not a banker, is the last decade or so I've been involved in fintechs. Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Ovenden. I'm the group CTO of Schroders. So we'd like to welcome you all, obviously, here today. We have a very nice auditorium and building. It's very nice to share it with you. Back before I was a CTO, I actually started as an engineer. I was a .NET and .NET ASP engineer, not about 30 years ago, I think I was doing it. So a fair time back. But also I've moved my career around a fair bit. I've had roles in health, I've had roles in retail and e-commerce, I've had roles in software as a service businesses, and now I work obviously in financial services. So not just about elevating your career, but also about moving between industries. I've done quite a lot of that.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nadia. I'm the Chief Customer Officer of Harrington Starr. I'm one of the co-founders. So welcome to everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. As you probably know, Harrington Starr, we place financial services individuals across the whole of financial services, fintech, all the way through to traditional financial services. Technology and sales staff is the areas that we really focus on. And I think that recruitment is one part of what we're talking about today, but realistically, we're talking about investing in people's careers and people looking at how they can progress themselves within their businesses. And when we started Harrington Starr, nearly 12 and a half years ago now, our mission wasn't just to find people jobs, but to partner with people long term so that we could help them make the best decisions for them. So we always talk about your success is our business. And that means for companies to become more successful and for people to become more successful within them. So today is a huge part of that, and it's great to be here and being on this panel.
Great, let's get started. Okay, so first question. I'm going to go first to David and Julie, just to give you a heads up. So what would you say are the top 3 skills needed for seeking a career in fintech? David, can we start with you, and then we'll get Judy to add?
Great. So first, I guess I would start off with, I guess, genuine interest and passion. So I think obviously fintech is an interesting area to be in, but it shouldn't just be because it's an interesting area to be in. So it's like, okay, why do you actually want to work within the financial technology sector? Be able to kind of demonstrate that passion. So if you're going through any process, to show like what you've done previously, or like why you actually kind of want to be in that space, is one I would highlight as first. And then in terms of second, in terms of skill sets, so fintech, and we were speaking to a little bit earlier, in terms of like problem solving and the ability to actually, what fintech is doing is advancing how we handle money, from savings to investing to budgeting, all these various different areas. But it's actually looking at understanding of, we are trying to solve real life problems and using technology, leveraging technology to do so. So the ability to kind of do that as well. And I guess being in the room and talk about engineering. So a big part of the fintech space is obviously a business strategy part, but a big area that is kind of development, and they have engineering kind of skills to actually build these kind of solutions. So kind of things I'll touch on.
Judy?
It's a good question. It's quite broad, isn't it? Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So I'd say the most important thing is passion. It builds on what you've just said, David. And with that needs to come the ability, or at least the desire, to cope with the bumps in the road, because it's not easy. You know, there are, and I think we're probably going to come on to it, moments where, you know, there are challenges, but being able to, you know this is something you really want to do, you love it, and therefore you're better prepared to cope with the bumps, as well as the, you know, the exciting times and when things all seem to be going really well. And then just linked to that, I'd also say, you know, having that agile, you know, open mindset as well, which again is connected. You know, and just being able to, not being fixed in your mindset, but being willing and able to embrace the opportunities and overcome the challenges along the way. That's probably enough from me, because otherwise we're going to run out of things for you.
It's quite, because both of you, those are quite sort of general, they're sort of mindsets more than, you know, you need a technical background or a financial background, or so you would prioritize. Absolutely. Yeah.
You can. I always say I recruit based on mindset and attitude, because you can build the skills. Absolutely. Don't limit yourself by thinking, well, you know, I'm not a techie, and I you know, I think I've done okay in the fintech world for the last decade or so. I have people around me who understand in more detail the technical side,
which is what Ron was
first,
saying.
Technical skills second.
Brilliant. Anything to add before I move on?
I'd probably add that fintech, really by its nature, is disruptive. It is, in many cases, a disintermediation of an existing value chain that's there, and the technology is coming and disrupting that and cutting out, you know, elements of that chain. So there's a commerciality I think that you probably need. You've got to have a level of innovative sort of approach and be able to see an opportunity. And then also I'd add some resilience, because not every single fintech that ever gets started makes, you know, a unicorn type valuation. So probably a bit of all of that.
Yeah, back to the bumps in the road, right? Okay, so the next question, I'm good. Well, let's see who wants to answer this one. So the question is, and by the way, I don't think it's a naive question, because the person wrote this may be a naive question, but what is the impact, positive and negative, on fintech growth? Because the UK is no longer in the single market. So has that impacted us negatively or positively? Anyone?
I feel we need Ron really to answer that. I across financial services, the challenges of not being part of the EU are difficult, probably for the city, I think, and I would imagine that therefore there's a level of challenge to UK fintech that comes from that. There are probably emerging advantages, though, to the ability to regulate differently, and with the right regulation, I would probably imagine that you could get more opportunity. But I don't declare myself the expert on that right now.
That's fine. Right. Well, we've got tons more questions, so let's move on. So this is a career innovation question. Handy, given the event. The question is, and let's see, Jamie, we might start off with you on this one. This question is, I've moved around development and testing for about 10 years, But I'd like to move into product management, and I don't know how to navigate to that. So any thoughts on that, and then we can open up.
Well, I guess, I mean, product, what does a product manager do, a product owner do? Their job really fundamentally is to look for the value in the application or the software or the thing that they're trying to develop. And they're not just the person that orders the tickets on the backlog. You know, they are ultimately, they should be accountable for the value that is coming through that product, and also be the person who has the strength of view, experience, commercial or whatever it may be that we're trying to deliver, to make a decision that says, actually, we need to change what we're doing, because carrying on this path is decreasing the value I'm delivering. If I move and go for this now, then I can make sure I'm always optimizing what I'm doing, and working in that, you know, that agile iterative cycle. So for an engineer, I think that actually there's a lot of common ground there between a lot of good engineers. Right? You're looking at an application, you're trying to optimize it, you're thinking about what we're trying to deliver and thinking, what's the best way I can do that? You're thinking about your code in a way that makes it reusable, that makes it more performant, that makes it more scalable. All of those are really their value points, and you're trading it against, well, I've got to get something done in a time period. So you're making trading off calls all the time. I've seen many engineers move from an engineering role to an engineering leadership role to a sort of a technical product owner role where I'm leading on a platform type development, and then from there get to be a more sort of more broad, I guess, business focused product owner. So I think there's a lot of common ground. I think there's quite a route.
I think to add to that, yeah, definitely on the right track in common ground. And I go actually, so I lead products Wealth at the moment, and before this I was acting as a product manager. But the roles I did before that, first of all, testing, before going into business analysis. And I remember at our technology delivery center, was that before anyone could even go into be a BA, we always made them test, because it was like understanding the framework of what you are. Like from a business point of view, you can always say things like, do this, customer wants X, I want this, but being able to understand the technical implications of like, how is it going to work systematically, and actually, how do you actually build this? And I think doing engineering and testing brings that to root of like, how does this actually work in a technical sense? And the only maybe gap I could say to this individual, that maybe to kind of plug, is and how you bring in that maybe that customer and that business focus. So maybe before directly jumping into a product role, if you have the possibility to do a business BA role or business analysis role, that could be a kind of stopgap before getting directly into product. But it's definitely all the right track, and super valuable having that holistic viewpoint before getting into being a product owner and product manager.
Great, thank you. Okay, Nadia, coming to you. Question about one of your favorite questions. How do we encourage greater diversity in the engineering sector?
Oh, I know I could take a full hour and a half on this just myself.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, I'll let you all sit back. I think this is something that anyone who follows me on LinkedIn, you know, this is something I talk about day in, day out. And I think that's the important thing of it, that it isn't just a side note or a side question on a panel, but it's a conversation that we are constantly having, and then actions that we're following up after that. One of the biggest actions that I talk about when it comes to inclusion in the workplace, and more specifically inclusion for technology engineers, is that everybody is active within it. Everybody understands that there are minorities within any type of workplace and within any particular technology skill set. When we look at technology engineers in particular, there's a whole load of reasons to why we have a minority. When we look at gender, for example, a really easy one to look at. We can look all the way back to our school system here in the UK. We can also look at school systems across the globe, and we need to work on how we change that. We also need to work on the perception of the space, how warm, how welcoming we are, how we are able to understand other people's points of view in a room, and how well we respond to somebody that we don't necessarily agree with. This is why I think this conversation is so central to today, because the questions that were asked before were about progression, how you can use your skill set to move into other areas within the business. Having diversity of thought, having people from different backgrounds, different opinions, different understandings of the world and how they live in it, can only be a good thing for that. So when we talk about inclusion, when it comes to technology engineers, we need inclusion. So we need to have a look at what it is that's getting in the way of inclusion. As I've mentioned, the educational system, how we're bringing people into our companies, and the environment that every single one of us is in control of in those companies. How we're responding to whoever sits next to us and their different world and the different way that they may live to you. How we're encouraging them to be open and honest with their opinions. How you yourself are listening and responding well to that. So there are many things I could talk about, but my biggest one on this is that we all own this, and we all need to work very hard to include people who haven't normally been included in the workplace.
David or Julie, anything to add on that?
No, Nadia said it all, hasn't she? So echo everything she
I think
said.
she might have written a book on it.
I think she might have done.
Maybe.
Get it, read it. I have.
That's very good. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. So there's quite an interesting question about how do you foster a fintech culture within a larger, more traditional organization? Julie, because obviously RBS was huge, it's slightly downsized slightly now. And obviously, David, you come from KPMG, so it'd be great to get your perspectives on that.
So my very short answer would be with difficulty. It's really interesting because if we go back to the people and the mindset, you know, when I first took over NatWest Rapid Cash, I think I had something like 95% were bankers who never worked anywhere else. You know, have lots of skills, but had never worked in a fintech type environment. So along come I in my red jacket or maybe yellow, or, you know, with a fintech type approach and culture. And they think, what on earth, you know, is this? You know, wanting everything done tomorrow or yesterday, and change our minds along the way. It's a challenge. You've got two very different cultures and you're trying to bring them together to ultimately achieve success. And I'd say one of the things I did is I did bring a few people in. So as I grew, I was looking for, you know, people that come from different backgrounds, so to try to create that diversity of thought, and that helps. But also spotting that, you know, don't pigeonhole people. So having just said I had a whole load of bankers who were very fixed mindset and all that, don't pigeonhole them, because the reason they'd come and they were working where they were working is they wanted to, you know, embrace the opportunity. So unlocking that and using, you know, the different approaches, the different attitudes, and I guess leading from the front as well, in terms of my style, my approach. You know, and it does take a little bit of time. I think they say to achieve cultural change, it's 10 years. I didn't have 10 years, but, you know, a combination of a number of different things, but being persistent and encouraging those to take it forward. I'm sure David's got some.
Yeah, no, so I think I'll add on, yes, with difficulty is that that's definitely the starting point. And I think it is I think that sometimes it's very easy to just like call out a problem and go, big organization, we can't make change. But if you kind of understand some of the reasons behind it and like the compliance and regulation and like reputational risk, when you kind of understand the reasons why an organization may be a little bit slow at making these changes, it puts it into perspective. But I do think like some opportunities, and I think this is kind of what Natwest has done, where you have like little pockets where you can like create a little pocket of innovation that's kind of a little bit shielded from the main organization, that allows it, be it to launch a new product, or be it to launch a new service, or be it just a test. And I think if you're in an organization like that doesn't exist, if you could put that forward as a business case, there are loads of examples of that working elsewhere. When you put that forward as a bit of a business case, and I think what that does is it allows the organization to, one, maybe look at it as, okay, well, we can reduce any reputational risk, or we can reduce any kind of risk that we think around this by allowing this innovation to work in a little bit of a hot kind of spot. But then what that does is then you can start to take the learnings from there and start to slowly implement that back in the organization. And back to the thing about being 10 years is like, it can't happen overnight. You can't change how an organization works overnight, because they're successful to be where they are, right? So they won't just change what they're doing overnight. But I think some of those innovative solutions could work. And if you put that forward, people, they'll listen. They'll sit down and have a discussion with you and kind of look at pros and cons, but they will entertain that, especially when you bring examples as well.
Great. Okay, I'm picking some of these questions because there's some great questions coming in. So let's think about this question. So what is something, and I'm going to open this out to the panel here, so again, put your hand up if you want to answer. What is something that you've done that you would say has had the biggest impact on your career to date? So, a trigger point, a decision point, you turned left to go one way, turned right to go another way. Who wants to start with that?
I can
Nadia?
start with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been a recruiter for longer than I'd like to say, 19 years. I've always placed developers into financial services, which I alluded to at the start. So you can imagine back in 2004, the world was a very, very different place to what it is now. And I always knew that I wanted to impact people in their careers, not just this is your next job, but what can you do within that job? And I was always kind of searching, like how can I make that impact? And it wasn't really until sort of 2010 we started Harrington Starr. I was able to really build the focus to not just be about your next job, but about what you do in your next job. And that's how we partner with our companies. But the big shift for me was probably 2017, 2018, when I started participating in stuff like this, where I would go and understand what is it that the good companies are doing and how can more of us get involved in that. And that's been big for me, because I was never the sort of person that wanted to sit in front of anybody else and talk. I never ever thought that I'd be hosting a podcast series or traveling to Amsterdam at the end of the month to talk in front of I don't know how many people. Even when I say it now, it fills me with dread. I don't know how I'm doing it, but the fact that I am is super impactful, because step by step I'm getting out there to different companies to make them understand what needs to happen to truly invest in people. And everything that everyone's saying on the panel here, that mindset, well, let's turn that to a reality. There's loads of companies out there that don't turn that to a reality, wouldn't give someone an opportunity to move from engineering into product, and we need to spread that word. I need to be able to go to Amsterdam at the end of the month and say, well, these guys are doing it, so you'll fall behind if you don't. So I think that's really important work.
Jamie?
I don't know if it's one thing I can point at, but I guess I have some approaches. One, that I've always been really clear about what it is that I want to do for my next step, be that the job, i.e. move from engineer to an engineering manager or something, or the company, or the sector. I want to go challenge myself over here, and then think about, well, what does that mean I need to pick up in terms of my experience, my capabilities, and I need to be able to showcase in order to be able to do that. So I've always thought in quite a constructive way about how do I bolt the bits on that I need in order to make the next step, and be very intentful about that. And then the other thing is, I've never stayed somewhere longer than I thought I should when I stopped enjoying it, or the job started to become a little bit less.
I thought you were about to give us a timeline.
No,
and I was just
about
to say to the Schroders people, and you've only just become CTO, so you're not.
Sometimes I wish my job were more dull, I have to be honest. So yes, that wasn't a news flash, don't I? But I think I've always been really sure that actually the time is right to go somewhere else, because some of maybe the enjoyment started to go, or I'm plateauing a bit, or I'm not being as challenged as I was. And putting those together, I think, has made me be far more purposeful about where I go in my career.
Julie?
Well, that goes on with what I was going to say, which is, I've worked for many different employers. I've also worked for myself. I'd say that's a great thing to do. When you suddenly sort of get sweaty palms and think, oh, I can't pay my mortgage this month, I need to chase some customers to pay, or I need to find new customers. That's always a piece of experience I look back on and just think, wow, I'm so glad I did that. But also, moving on and taking some chances and taking some risks. And sometimes you can, take a sideways move, or even what could on paper look like a backward step to help you move forward. And this is very corny, out of adversity comes opportunity. I remember a few years back, I was involved in a project to set up a new business in Poland. I was working for a big independent financial services group, and I was just sort of in the project team, working in the office, and the guy that was actually going to go and set the business up, at the last minute, the sort of negotiations with him fell through. And I went to my boss and said, so what's going to happen? He said, well, someone's got to go. So I went home to my husband at the time. We're now divorced. This maybe was part of the reason why I went home and I said, how would you feel if I went and worked in Warsaw? And he went, Warsaw, Birmingham, that's not too bad, is it? I went, no, Poland. And I was only supposed to go for 6 months, but I ended up setting the whole business up, recruiting the Polish team and all that. And they celebrated their 20-year anniversary last week. And that's something I'm really proud of. And I never expected it to happen. I hadn't planned for it to happen, but I'm so glad I just took that chance and did it. So yeah, take a risk.
Yeah. David.
Yeah, no, I think I would just reiterate that. I guess I've been in my career for 12 years, so I'm maybe still looking for that big moment. But I think risks and what's the thing about like luck is where like preparation meets opportunity. So like it doesn't always need to be such a, like you're in this room today, for example. So like someone you can meet today, a conversation you have today, you might follow up with that person in 6 months' time. These little things build up. And I think for like, one specific example I look at is, I remember after 2015, after my grad scheme, I was full of life, excited, feeling on top of the world. I meet someone at a bar that was running a music startup, and I quit my job to big dismay of my family and everyone. I was like, I'm going to work for a startup building MTV's music app. And my parents were like, you're going to go leave your great job to work at MTV. Fast forward 18 months, the company did well, but we lost funding, and Viacom pulled out, backed up. I was unemployed 4 months, and I thought this was the worst decision I made in my life, and everything was over. But I looked several months later, and I ended up going back to KPMG. But I was brought back in as if I didn't leave. I was brought back in to kind of lead our digital delivery kind of center. The experiences I got from this experience was really valuable. And it was also a point where like I really understood the world of startups, which later led on to everything else I did. But I remember being, and I bear the full points, and I mean days on days, and thinking I have failed. I should have listened. This is the worst moment of my life. I can't pay my rent, nor my mortgage. I can't pay my rent. But that experience is the reason why I'm kind of like sat here today, and everything that's come off the back of that. So yeah, take a little bit of risks. Sometimes things won't go as planned, but that's fine. It's a sideways move. Sometimes you have to move backwards. But continue doing things like this, being in the room, being in the space, speak to people, put yourself out there, and something will spark along the way.
Thank you. And it's actually, it's interesting because the next question that I've picked is a sort of follow-on, because the question, and I think this will resonate with so many people in the room, I find navigating my career within a company hard, often feeling I need to leave a company in order to progress. Is that something that resonates? Because I know it's something we talk about a lot here in Schroders, but if we can, let's not talk about Schroders first of all. Maybe Julie, do you want? Sorry.
Yes, I'm not going to encourage you all to quit today, but the reality is, I see my career as a portfolio, and the more sort of diversity in my experience, the type of organisations I've worked for, the better. When I go on to, talk to a future employer, then that breadth is quite important. So, yeah, I just quickly say, in terms of where you are currently, if you're in a big organisation, something that often I see missing is people don't have mentors and they don't have sponsors. But and we always talk about it, but particularly a sponsor. Because the sponsor should be the person that will speak up, on your behalf when you're not in the room. And in big organisations, that's really, really important.
Funny enough, that's one of the next questions. But
sorry,
it's like you've seen. No. But before we come back to that question, what's your?
I'll add, I think it's. I remember when I first started working, and like actually the perception was you don't leave your job after 1 year, 2 years, and you have to build your networks, and you have to do all these things, mean stay in an organization. And I flip forward, and maybe a younger generation, and like, I don't know, Gen Z, or newer generations, and I look at my sister, for example. She's worked at TikTok, Facebook, and Snapchat, and and she's 26, and and I kind of looked back and go, wow, how have you gone to so many different places? But the reason why those organizations have actually hired her and gone into kind of bring her in is because of the experiences she's got at those different places. So I feel now it's definitely changing. I think going out, leaving is potentially good. But one thing I would say is I worked at KPMG twice. I left and I came back. And I think one thing organizations possibly need to do is leaving is not it's not like a bad word, like, oh, you're leaving us, like, and it's over and we're never going to speak to you again and you've broken my heart and that's it. It's, oh, like, why are you going? And an understanding of if you're going to further your career or an opportunity that doesn't currently exist, if the organization can give you that opportunity, great, but if not, and it's not the end all be all, right? You can potentially come back in a future life or in a different scenario. And I think that fluidity there needs to be more encouraged. And it's not just, oh, I quit and I'm leaving. And therefore, when you're asking the question, it seems like, oh, should I leave? Like, is that a bad thing? And I don't want someone to know. So be a bit more fluid.
Can I just add, I previously worked for Natwest. I joined in 1986 and I left in 94 and I rejoined 25 years later. So yeah, I completely agree with that.
Nadia, and then I'll let Jamie have the last word.
I'll just add to that. So just from the recruitment perspective and what we're seeing across Harrington Starr at the moment, there's been a huge rise in counter offers. So when people are in that room handing in their notice and they're getting asked, why are you leaving? And understanding that it's about a new opportunity or a new experience or a learning, they're then sitting there and going, okay, well, can we give you that? And I always encourage people, why didn't we have that conversation before? Why aren't we talking to our employers now about, can we move from that engineer role into that product through the BA route? And why aren't we as vocal as we could be on that? Because it's not a dirty word, progression. Like, that's what we should be demanding from our employers. So just from the recruitment perspective, we always will turn you back to your current company and say, well, what can you do here? Where can you move within? Because what is happening right now, which I think is really dangerous, is this rise of counteroffers. People are accepting them. And that's never a good thing, because you're now, like, the company knows you don't really want to be there. You've already gone out and interviewed elsewhere, but then you were persuaded because it's more comfortable to stay. And okay, they've kind of given you what you asked for. But if we'd done this the right way at the start, it would be a much more positive way of elevating yourself. So I felt that was important to mention too.
Be really careful what I say here, given there's quite a few people from Schroders in them. On counter offers, I completely agree. I've been countered twice, I think. And accepted the counter and stayed, and neither time have I stayed past 12 months. It's always something far more fundamentally wrong than money, and money didn't fix the reason actually why I wanted to move. So I've sat there with the extra money and thought, you know, actually that's not it, and then taken extra money and then negotiated a bigger salary elsewhere. So it's all worked out well. But I've never stayed really, I think, after a counter. I completely agree with that. I completely agree. I think that it is hard to navigate your way sometimes through an organisation in your career. We here, can I talk about Schroders? Is that, talk about Schroders? And we have a big technology group. You know, it's a very geographically spread type technology group, and we align ourselves to our business units. So there are groups within the group. You know, there's an investment technology group that focus on investment tech. There's a distribution technology group that focus on distribution marketing technology and such. So there is a sort of a bubble within there for different teams where those also can get quite insular. And then role titles can start to move and change. There can be a lack of understanding. If I'm an engineer over here, what makes that engineer over there several groups removed from me any different? They might have a slightly different job title. And when I became a CTO at Schroders, which is about 2 years ago now, I was really struck by it, and I was really bothered by it, because actually I could see really good people leaving because I felt they couldn't go anywhere. But the other over here, I could see loads of opportunity and all these roles, and we weren't managing it and tying it up properly. So we spent a long time within Schroders, and I don't think this is massively unique, but it's really helped us to try and standardize job titles within job families. So a job family for us would be engineering, and then within there we'd have sub sort of grades of cloud engineering, data engineering, software engineering, you know, and such, security engineering, and then we'd have progression through there. So you start as an associate, you move to be an engineer itself, then you be a senior engineer, and ultimately a lead engineer. And you can start to see, therefore, the family you live in and the way that you can progress, and you can recognize everyone else's job title, and you can work out where you are. And then what we've done under that, which is the fundamental thing that makes this really work, is we've created career frameworks. And those career frameworks, there's common elements at an engineering level, and then there's far more specific elements at the subcategory that might be into software engineering or cloud engineering or whatever it will be. But they describe what our expectations are of you when you are at a certain place and level in your career. and how we believe you should be behaving, and how we believe you should be growing, and what we believe you should be trying to look for in order to progress. So when someone says, comes to us and says, well, I'm an engineer and I should be a senior engineer, they've got a framework underneath that both we can talk to them about and they themselves can look at and can understand. And they can therefore hopefully understand why somebody is more senior than them, someone is less senior than them. If they want to be at that same level, they can understand how do they develop those skills and how do they get there. And because we've sort of mapped it across the whole of the enterprise, I could now be an engineer over here. I mean, ultimately, generally there's a bit of a tightening in terms of number of roles as you go up a pyramid. So there may not be an opportunity for me to move to a senior above me, but actually there's a senior engineer in a group that's over that way, which I now understand what I need to do in order to be able to get there. So we spent a lot of time doing this, and I think we're really starting to see the benefits of it now. And I think people that come in here or people that are within here understand that it's fundamentally there for them. It helps them in terms of their progression, and it helps them in terms of their career development.
Right, I'm conscious of time. We're going to do, I think, a couple more questions. So I'd like to follow up on this one about the mentoring. So it's an interesting one. It says, how do you find and onboard mentors? And I'm going to add another element to this, which is a lot of people who come and talk to me, they're almost like, oh, can I ask you? I think asking someone to be your mentor, how do you tackle that? If you think they're too senior, they're going to be too busy, have they got the time to do that? So how have you approached finding mentors, both for yourselves and for people in your teams? And difference between a mentor and a sponsor, I think would also, because Julie, you mentioned having a sponsor, and I think that's a key difference, and they are slightly different things. Is that right, Julie? Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'd say a mentor is more of a sounding board. And how do you find one? I found one at events like this. I've also been asked at events like this. I've never said no to anybody who's asked me to mentor them. Interestingly, most commonly, people don't follow up. So I say, yes, happy to connect with me on LinkedIn, drop me a message, and then that's it. And I don't hear from them again. And that's the most frustrating thing as a mentor is, the mentee needs to drive it. Yeah. So yeah, ask, find out if there's somebody, working in an area who's got some experience that you think might be useful in an area you're interested in. If you want to go into product, get a mentor from somebody in product, for example.
Yeah.
But just, be bold. And if they are too busy and they're already mentoring too many people and they say no, they're probably not the right person for you anyway, and find somebody else, or ask them, do they know anybody else who potentially could mentor? And then, as I say, the sponsor is somebody that if you're in the room, you're not in the room, and they will look out for you. They know you, they understand you, they know your skills and what you bring. So I don't know, they're looking for somebody's hiring and saying, I'm struggling to fill this role. Do you know anyone? That person would say, you should speak to Julie or Andy or whoever.
Yeah.
So
David?
Quite different.
Yeah, no. So I totally agree with everything Julie's mentioned. I think when you're looking for a mentor, one thing I would say is being quite clear on what is it I guess you want. So like if you just need to ask someone, hey, I want to pick, I don't know, picking your brain sometimes, but hey, I just want to find out certain things about this product's role that I'm hiring. Can I ask you these questions? You don't need to ask that person to be your mentor, right? Because you could just go specifically, can I have a 30-minute coffee with you to discuss specifically this? If it is you're looking for a mentor and it is a bit more long-term, so being clear on that as well, because I think that will help with not following up, because if you know why you're kind of asking and not this awkward, well, now you're my mentor and I don't know what to say to you in 3 months' time, but if I just run away and just not respond. Then with the mentors, so be open, ask in events like this. But again, you've got to lead it. Like your mentor is likely to be busy. Everyone's busy, right? Every single person is occupied. So they are not necessarily gonna, if I got a mentee, I'm not necessarily going to go out my way to follow up or do things. So you've got to be one that's kind of actually leading it, driving it. And that's not just in the follow-ups, but in the meetings, ensuring that when you have those sessions, you're quite clear in what you want to discuss, what the outcomes are. And that will actually make the person that you're meeting feel a bit more, oh, this was a good session. I enjoyed our conversation. Because at the end of the day, it is a conversation that you're kind of having. And people want to do this, right? Because everybody would have had mentors. So like one thing I do is I always kind of openly say yes, because I know that I wouldn't be where I am today if somebody didn't help me. So it's like this kind of like, I must pay it forward. I think maybe the difference is sponsors. I know some organizations, I don't know what's maybe done here, but some organizations have like systematic things in place. I've found that when it's more natural, it does work more effectively. So if you have a buddy system or mentor system, they're good because it helps it start. But I think people as human beings, if it's natural, you're more inclined to be invest more time into it. So yeah.
Nadia, do you see? Do you get requests for mentors? I mean, because there's internal mentors and external mentors, right? So
I get a lot of requests for mentoring, and I wanted just to point out just a couple of the points that have been mentioned, just how important they are. The like how well you mesh with the person that's mentoring you is so important, and you may have an initial conversation with a few people and it just not be right, and that's okay. It's still a good conversation, you're still learning from it, but it's about finding somebody that you really can bounce off. And actually, it's not that individual's doing you a favor. So the people that I mentor, they are making such an impact on me. So they may be at the beginning years of their career or further forward and talking about how to be promoted or recognized in the workplace. And just their individual lives and what's happening on in their workplaces and the impact that I am making on them, but also the honesty that I get back from them has really helped me understand my workplace better and what I can do day in, day out, and also how I present myself. And I think that, people often forget that. They think mentoring is always, sort of top down. There's that upward mentoring as well, which we're starting to hear more of, which is super powerful. So it really is that sort of mesh relationship rather than I'm helping you out.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, last question. And hopefully I'd like an answer from each of you, please, and we'll just go down this. I'll start with you, David. If you could, it's a classic one, isn't it? If you could give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Piece of advice, I'm going to say notes. I think just continue to be curious, take risks, be open, and just don't be hard on yourself, and just take every opportunity that comes and embrace it.
Great. Julie?
Mine would be don't be afraid to fail. Failure's got quite negative connotations with it, but out of failure, there is so much learning, and some of the best things I've learned through my career have come where things have gone wrong. So yeah, almost embrace it, accept it.
Yeah.
Maybe actively seek it, but aim for success. But if you fail along the way, you're still heading in the right direction.
Jamie?
Buy Bitcoin in 2014. Sell it in 2020. Get out. Keep having fun. Definitely.
Great. Nadia?
Definitely, being scared is good. I've always battled with sort of my personality type, and if I'm a bit scared about something in the workplace, it means I haven't done it before, which means I must be getting better. So I'm trying out something I've not done.
Great. Right. If I could have a big round of applause, please, for the panel. Thank you. Right. So quick reminder on what's next. As you go out there, turn right, because that's where lunch is. All right. So lunch is turn right. And then when you get to the breakout sessions, come back and go down this way. And we've got a session on engineering. So how do we do engineering here at Schroders? We've got Richard Brockshaw and John Chikuma, some of our top engineers, who are just going to talk through how we approach it, the cool stuff. And we are building some cool stuff, by the way. Just had to put that in there. We've also got Natasha McCabe. She joined our technology leadership team earlier this year. So listening to her and her career and her thoughts. So anybody who wants to ask, these are very informal sessions as well. So feel free to jump in and ask questions. We've got some of our HR business partners here. Can you wave, please? HR, thank you, at the back of the room. HR in the back row, thank you. So if anybody, because there's loads of questions that have come in on Slido about asking for salary rises, what are the best skill sets to have? How do I transition my career? Feel free to pick their brains. You've got an open forum here. No one from your company. Yes, Schroders staff, we know who you are because you've all got badges, just by the way. But feel free to join in the conversation. So you can pick the brains of our lovely HR colleagues. Also, if you have if you want to follow up with anybody, the people with badges are Schroders employees or Harrington Starr. And earlier this year, so every year in Schroders, we run an innovation challenge. And this year, in fact, she's in the audience, the winner was Shivani and another of her colleagues. And the idea was to build a QR code for business cards. Because I bet, well, particularly, sorry, I'm making assumptions. I'm looking at the stage thinking I'm going to say something and make a generalization. I was going to say, I know I had these back in the day when you had boxes of business cards and you never used them and they just lay around and, you know, ended up in landfill. Well, we're quite big on ESG at Schroders and we thought this is a brilliant idea. So Shivani and Cody won this innovation challenge. And so anybody with a Schroders badge, if you want to swap details, any questions, anything we can help you with, they can give you their business card electronically through these electronic business cards. So well done, Shivani. On a slightly less serious note, there is a magician wandering around, so have some fun with that. And a photographer who's got a bit of a retro camera, but with electronic photos, but also instantly print stuff out if you want a physical, you know, retro style photo that you can just take with you. We've got the balloon arch, which, by the way, is all biodegradable. So nothing is going to end up in land. I can promise you that. That was the brief that we all discussed for this event. And it's going to be donated to a children's home afterwards because, again, we didn't want it to just end up in a rubbish bin somewhere. And then there is the infamous retro games room. Pac-Man, anyone around the corner, okay? And I would also like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Francis, our brilliant sign language interpreter. And you know it's a small world when Francis and I said hello at the beginning. It turns out her brother works for Schroders. So it's brilliant. So at this point, I think we have some thank yous for the panelists. And then you are all free to go and have some lunch. And can I just, the catering here is pretty good, so enjoy because it's really good. And then you're free to come and go as you see fit and as per your timetable. But if we can say thank you to the panelists one more time.